I was just growing disillusioned with, the evangelical experiment, just kind of, God's doing a new thing. And, it's just longing for something with roots, a place where God was worshiped with awe and reverence, and not just kind of the next goosebump or the next, I don't know, personality driven preacher or worship leader.
Hey, and welcome back to Barrel Age Faith. Today I have a wonderful guest, Father Christopher Foley. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's a joy to be here. Thank you.
And it's great to have you. I mean, I've seen your interviews online, your story about your the band Luxury and the unique story there. I point people to the documentary. I'll just kind of link it below and people can check that out. It's been neat to hear about, first of all, your journey into Orthodoxy, but also see what's going on with your parish, Holy Cross down in North Carolina. Did you recently build a church?
Yeah, a year and a half ago, we moved into our new building, and it's just unreal. I mean, I'm still pinching myself. Like, are we house sitting, and the owners are going to come back at some point? 'Cause we've been in rented facilities for probably 17 years of our existence. So yeah, just to be able to have a new building, and it's glorious, and it just happened to coincide with this growth in our Orthodox churches around the country. We were poised and ready for the growth, and we've had just phenomenal growth since we moved in. So glory to God.
Yeah, it's a really beautiful thing, to watch. I mean, I see it in my own parish and many Orthodox parishes across the country. You just kinda hear people like, "Yeah, like, we're doubling in size and we have nowhere to go." People, they wish they were in your shoes, right? Like, that the building was already done, but you had to go through the fire of the rented facilities.
Yep. Yeah, I did not have any gray in this beard when I think that process started. So
So, I before we get into some, like, questions about the growth of Orthodoxy or what does it mean to be an Orthodox priest in the Bible Belt or to be a father, I'm interested to just kind of hear a little bit about your story of becoming Orthodox, a little bit about your band. So I've got some questions. I was a big, huge Tooth and Nail Records guy, so that'll be fun to talk about. But before that, you grew up did you grow up evangelical, Baptist?
yeah,
What was your
evangelical,
denomination?
very much non-denominational, no creed but Christ. We're not Baptist, we're Christian, that sort of background. But, was raised in a very, strong Christian home, really taught to love Christ, love the church, love scripture. And, I was really on my way to maybe even become a missionary. That's where I went to Bible college to study missiology, while at the same time kind of being involved in, the band. And there's kind of this parallel, movement there. But yeah, I think it was in my college years that there was a group of about 40 of us, I guess, that were part of a vineyard church. And that was kind of my first foray into, a charismatic-ish type church, but just was really drawn to the people there, while I was in college in Northeast Georgia, Toccoa Falls College. But our assistant pastor and worship leader kind of started reading church history, and started talking about liturgics and spiritual disciplines. I think for myself, and uh, who became my wife at the time, my girlfriend, I mean, there was just a group of us that were just really drawn to what we were learning about. I was just growing disillusioned with the evangelical experiment of,
Yep.
just kind of, God's doing a new thing. And, it's just longing for something with roots, a place where God was worshiped with awe and reverence, and not just kind of the next goosebump or the next, I don't know, personality driven preacher or worship leader. And so, make a long story short, our assistant pastor found out about this group called the Evangelical Orthodox Church. Um, so we started learning about Orthodoxy through this group. This was part of the Evangelical Orthodox Church that did not go into the Antiochian Archdiocese in 1987. There was a group called the Holdouts, a number of parishes that just didn't feel like they were ready. and that's the group we found out about. So they came down and from Indianapolis and kind of told us about their journey, and it really resonated with us. And so there was a number of years where, we were an evangelical Orthodox church. It just really, I guess the way I think about it now is maybe it was a very long catechumenate. Basically, it was a Protestant denomination borrowing very heavily from Orthodoxy, but I think we quickly realized that it's kind of an oxymoron to be an independent Orthodox church, that basically we are still kind of Protestant in our orientation. So we wound up kind of entering, the fullness of the canonical
Mm.
Orthodox Church. All, probably about 35 or 40 of us were chrismated, and this was 2001, I think it was. We felt like we were really completing a journey. We were longing for the filet mignon, and we were getting potato chips. The potato chips tasted great, but we wanted to enter more fully into the life of the church, where we were being shaped and formed, by the church, her liturgical life, the sacramental life. So really found a home within the Orthodox Church.
Yeah, that's wonderful. I think this is such an important thing to talk about because there are like a number of people across at least the United States who might be in church ministries, Protestant, who are thinking about doing this, but they're thinking this through like do we just try to do the Orthodox thing here at our parish? And so it's good to kind of hear these stories about, well, we tried it for a time and then people have different stories. I mean, I remember I was in college and I went to a conference on the church fathers, and it was very much part of this whole convergence movement with Robert Weber, Ancient Future Faith. I read his books and it was blowing me away. But for many of us Protestants who were going into church ministry, that was like what my degree was in, biblical theology and church Christian education, and we were just kind of moving this direction. We were thinking about, okay, how do we bring the ancient liturgy, the church fathers, monasteries, all of this into what we're doing,
Yeah.
and we quickly find that, "Oh, this is much bigger than me. Maybe I just need to submit." So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, and I think we realized that the journey had to be about ourselves finding a home, rather than feeling like we want to bring orthodoxy, to this church that we're, currently a part of. Like, no, it was important to be shaped and formed, by the church, and not feel like I'm using orthodoxy in order to, I don't know, change everybody else over here. It needed to be about our own change and transformation first and foremost. Uh,
Yeah. I
yeah.
was also really concerned about, and this, I don't know if this was something that you were going through as well, but the whole, like, yeah, well, even if they did buy into this whole thing, you had a parish that just did buy into this whole Orthodox thing. Could you keep it that way for the next generation as within Protestantism? You know, would it have the ability to even do that? And for me, that was like, I don't think so. But I that was a big question I was wrestling with, like even just kind of future generations. We're always trying to in Protestantism sort of try to discover what the early church was, and it always seems to be kind of like answering it in different ways. Um,
Yeah, and then kind of making it up when you don't know the connections in, I think being shaped and formed by the church is so important, that you're stepping into a new kind of universe of experience, that you don't have to figure it out. You don't have to make it up in this new context. It's already there. It's present, all around you. You just got to find it, and
yeah,
I think
I've got this hymnal. It's called the First Christian Hymnal by Dr. Shoemaker, and it's translating the hymns from Jerusalem in like the 300s. And I just kind of stumbled upon this line where Mary is described, or Holy Theotokos is described as the burning bush. Which, of
mm,
course, you see that icon, I've got that icon in our church, and you see it everywhere, but I wasn't sure when that icon was made, the first time someone had that icon thought, but to find it in the 300s that they were singing this, about our Holy Theotokos in Jerusalem where Christ rose again, that was just like a beautiful moment to
right.
read that and take that in.
Yep.
That's just something that you can't replicate.
Well, and yeah, the typology was like from the get-go, like
Yeah.
before the canon of scripture was closed. That's how the apologists were, teaching the faith. they were teaching Christ according to the scriptures. What were the scriptures at the time? It was the Old Testament. So telling these stories, through seeing Christ, seeing the cross, seeing that they took us all in these Old Testament stories. And it's so clear. And the church was doing that from the beginning, really.
It truly is. Now I wanna go back just a little bit because you were a musician, you are a musician, an artist. You were in a sort of in a I don't know if you wanna call it a bubble. I don't know.
Very
So
much bubble.
yeah, it was a bubble. It was a bubble. I mean, not only is alternative Christian music a bubble, which I grew up in, going to conferences and the Choir of the Fire and listening to Newsboys, DC Talk, and all these bigger bands, but then there was this whole record label called Tooth and Nail, which seemed like it was the alternative to the alternative. And that's where I actually lived in that music scene. I mean, I went to those shows, I bought all the albums. So when I heard that your band Luxury was through Tooth and Nail, I was just like, "Oh my goodness, this is a fun connection." What in what way did your experience as a musician and in this band affect your journey to Orthodoxy? Because
Yeah. I
2
mean,
other of you became Orthodox priests, right?
yeah,
Or
yeah,
yeah.
3 of us became priests. I mean, there was kind of a parallel story going on. I mean, I grew up in the Atlanta area and, was definitely involved in the underground music scene. I was really drawn to kind of the punk rock, kind of hardcore underground scene in the 80s and early 90s. And, I was trying desperately to find other Christians who knew about that scene. So I was, always looking, okay, are there Christian, punk bands or hardcore bands? And, Cornerstone Festival was kind of the big festival every year that everybody went to in the non-mainstream Christian world. So I think once I got to college, I thought, okay, I've been playing bass for 3 years now. I was in all these bands in high school and, part of the underground music scene and helping to put on shows and benefits for the homeless and um, kind of focusing on the positive side of what can we do as this punk rock underground. But I found for me as a Christian, it didn't conflict with my with my Christian faith, and in some ways, like the activism of the underground music scene, it was like people really trying to make a positive change. I was part of the kind of the straight edge punk movement, and then so to find out that there were Christians involved in that, and then going to Tacoma Falls College, then meeting the guys that became Luxury, just finding some like-minded people that wanted to do music, drawn to maybe non-mainstream style of music. Um, and then we started realizing there was other Christians around the country that were also doing this. And there were like venues that were starting to open, basements of churches, coffee shops, and different things. So we started playing a circuit around the Southeast, playing some kind of secular clubs too, but also playing some of these Christian-ish shows. Then got to know this band called The Prayer Chain that was pretty big, kind of in the 90s. And they really encouraged us to go to Cornerstone. And that was around the time that Tooth and Nail Records started. Tooth and Nail Records they were just trying to be a label that supported Christians making music, not so much like a Christian label, like you had to be this evangelistic, type band. So they started putting out some albums, Starflyer 59, MXPX, and it's like, wow, here's a label that's doing some pretty cool stuff.
Yeah. I
So
pretty much had all of MXPX's albums, pretty much
yeah.
every yeah.
So once we kind of saw what they were doing, we are like, man, we want to get their attention. So our friends in the prayer chain knew Brandon, who started Tooth and Nail. It's like, oh, you got to check out this band Luxury when they come up to Cornerstone. So we played in '93, played the impromptu stage, and then we were offered a record deal like right there after we played. And so within kind of a year, we had gotten in the studio and our first album was released, and I guess kind of the rest is history there. But yeah, just resonated with what Tooth and Nail was doing. But it was at the very beginning stages. I think our album was like maybe, I don't know, the 16th release or something.
Wow, okay. Yeah.
And then Tooth and Nail went on to be, a lot bigger, but we released two albums on Tooth and Nail and then kind of did some other albums with some kind of local labels in Atlanta. And
Yeah, they had a few big really big bands that, like, stuck with them, like MXPX and, like, Under Oath and some other ones that and then I was surprised how many started with them that maybe eventually switched to other labels like Supertones and Bleach and other people like that,
yeah,
but,
yeah.
oh, and I also read that Sufjan Stevens that he was involved with Tooth and Nail,
Yeah,
is that right?
he played with a band called Danielson Family that was on Tooth and Nail. So Sufjan would have definitely kind of been aware of that whole world early on. And I think I
I
even saw
see.
him play with Danielson.
I mean, I have, like, friends who were not Christians at all, and they were like, "Sufjan Stevens is he's like my Bible," like, because of his writing.
Yeah, no, he's one of my favorite all-time artists. Him and Dave Bazan from Pedro the Lion,
Yeah,
which was also in Tooth and Nail at the very beginning.
right.
Those two songwriters for me are just still I listen to them all the time.
Well, I think there was something deep going on with their writing that maybe they couldn't express maybe in their evangelical subculture. I don't
Right, right.
know.
No, I think so. I mean, I think they were committed to being, truly artists and, writing kind of from their experience rather than feeling like that they were having to, I don't know, kind of write propaganda music or something.
Yeah, I mean, I was talking to, an iconographer who grew up evangelical and went to Indiana Wesleyan pretty close to where I graduated, Taylor University, and he went to school for art, and he was like, "What am I supposed to do as an evangelical and with my art? Do I just throw a cross on everything, or can I take it to other places as a Christian?" And eventually it led to him becoming Orthodox and discovering iconography, and he became an iconographer.
During that time, I was also reading Father Alexander Schmemann for the Life of the World. Like to me, that book is so foundational for me in my journey into Orthodoxy, but it answered a lot of questions with my frustration of, you know, kind of like what you were just talking about, being a Christian who was an artist, who, what does it mean, to bring Christ into the midst of everything that we do, offering up all of our talents, that we don't want to dichotomize into. I always struggled with this like secular versus sacred dichotomy because in that little Christian bubble, oh, you can't listen to secular music, only Christian music. Well, what makes music Christian? No one can really kind of define what makes music Christian. So, that first chapter for the Life of the World, where he kind of throws those distinction on its head and just says, really, it's not sacred versus secular. It's what does it mean to be a priest of creation that is taking the stuff of this world and offering it up to God with Eucharist, with praise and thanksgiving, asking God to return it as something life giving. So for me as a musician, it just answered a lot of questions like, oh, I don't have to be like, you know, in a Christian band writing, evangelistic songs. It's just you can create something that's beautiful and uplifting, and by virtue of just of offering it up, we're doing something beautiful and co-creative, and um, yeah, and just to understand, that the early church kind of rejected this dualism that
Right.
was prevalent in the current evangelical experience, where yeah, so that was going on at the same time that, luxury was really starting to play. And, um, I was just always interested in art. I'm also a visual artist, wound up switching schools actually, when I became Orthodox and finished with a graphic design and painting uh, degree. And, just always wondering, like, what does it mean to be a Christian artist, and in Orthodoxy, in our approach to beauty, and beauty even maybe being considered one of the divine energies of God himself, so like beauty, when we experience something that's beautiful, it's somehow emanating from God himself. And so we're not afraid of that. So we want
Yeah,
the
if you
that are beautiful.
if you wanna see the Orthodox worldview and then seek a beauty first approach, you probably should read this book.
I love that book. I
Yeah,
talk about it all the time.
me too. I reference it all the time.
Yeah.
It's a great work. I actually interviewed Dr. Timothy.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
That's
with my friend Jonah Martin. He published the work through St. Nicholas Press, and it was a wonderful interview. But, yeah, this book is definitely kind of like a tome, 800 pages of this whole approach to many
Yep.
disciplines and
Yeah,
aspects to
beauty
life.
first. Yep, absolutely.
It should be in a college course. I wish I had had this book in college. That
Yeah,
would have saved me probably a lot of time. If you grew up evangelical, then you're not really thinking about, how to build beautiful churches. It
that's
was more of like a pragmatic thing, like, how can we build a church that attracts the world, and so it turns into a concert hall or a stage, and then you also have kind of the modern age, which is making things kind of ugly as well, and
right.
so then you run into the ancient and medieval tradition. And I think right now because of social media like Instagram, for how much bad comes through those means, there's also this great beauty that's coming through where people are almost kind of remembering our past, finding our past,
Right.
and that beauty that's there. Have you seen that even happening maybe with people checking out Orthodoxy for the first time? I just
Oh,
saw
yeah,
the beauty.
yeah, no, people are drawn to something beautiful. I think people are left longing for more, and I think the entertainment-driven, celebrity pastor, it just there might be wonderful pastors and might be, wonderful entertainment, but the people that are coming through our doors, I'm asking people all the time, like, why are you here? Like, what brought you here? And 99.9% of the time, it's an online experience. People have started looking into orthodoxy, or the algorithm is giving them orthodox content, and they're just really drawn to something that is beautiful and true, and that's what they're longing for. In fact, I mean, a lot of the people we knew in the Christian music scene, I mean, so many of those people have just completely deconstructed and just left Christianity altogether, because I think the only thread that was holding them onto Christianity was that music scene. And I think when that music scene kind of has run its course, and it's just it's left people with nothing, really to hold on to. And so that's been hard to see, but also, like, I just have this burden, for folks that are like, before you completely leave Christianity altogether, like, consider, uh, the Orthodox faith, because I think it will answer a lot of your questions, and what you're longing for. So it's really fascinating. The people, like, right now we have about 75 people coming to our catechism class right now, and like I'm asking these people, like, why are you here? And it's all this desire for an embodied faith where Christ is truly worshiped with reverence, with awe. There is tradition to sink their kind of teeth into, and it's something that, it's an orthopraxy. It's a way of living one's life. That means having one's life changed and transformed by Christ Himself. And yeah, it's really, I'm just in awe.
Mm.
you know.
What do you think about this moment when it comes to both the opportunities, but also challenges of extreme growth and interest?
Yeah, yeah, we're experiencing the challenge, certainly, of in a parish, like we've talked about, we have this beautiful building, but, like, if people want to continue the level of pastoral care that have been part of our parish, like, we're averaging about 200 on Sundays. Like, you know, one priest can't practically, pastor more than about probably 200 people on that same level
Yeah.
of kind of care, interpersonal meeting, and all of that. So, we've even begun the discussion about, how can we afford perhaps a second priest? What are this past year we have a part-time office admin person that is really helpful in kind of keeping track of everybody. You need that. It's just these practical things that, as we grow, parishes are going to have to figure out, how can we kind of meet that growth, with maybe even more staff, or starting a mission. Some parishes are starting missions, taking a group of people that are from a certain area, maybe 30 minutes away, you know? I mean, there's just a lot of discussion going on about how to handle that growth. Um, you know, so it's that part's been been difficult. Um, you know, certainly it's a joy to be receiving so many. I mean, there's just this incredible energy at the parish right now here of just this excitement, all these new people, and it's just, you know, people are getting to know people, and you know, it's just, you know, coffee hour, people hang out till about, you know, 3 or 4. I
Yeah.
heard last Sunday people stayed till 5:30. I was gone, but um, you know, so there's that excitement. I think the struggle a little bit too is I've had to, you know, kind of work on my catechism a little bit of just really making sure when you have this many people coming that, you know, the challenge to really catechize and make sure that we're kind of leaving our baggage at the door and really being shaped and formed by the church, and letting the church shape and form us and not bring our own, I don't know, political or ideological concerns and trying to kind of force that into orthodoxy. I think the opposite needs to happen. I think we need to be shaped and formed by the church and maybe just kind of like bracket everything else until we have a chance to really, you know, fully become orthodox. And but that takes conversations with people too, one-on-one conversations. Um, yeah, so I mean, I think that's just one of the challenges.
Yeah, I think when you mentioned, like, having 200 people, there's some people out there listening might say, "Oh, well, that's not too many people. Well, we've got 10,000 people at our church, or
Yeah,
my
just
Catholic parish has 1,000 or 2,000 people." But, I mean, I think one of the things that you were even mentioning when we're kind of implying, like, when people are deconstructing, they're in search of something. One of those things is, like, healing, uh, and in Orthodoxy, it's your spiritual father and your pastor, that relationship is taken quite seriously.
yeah, it really is. It really is, and it's like, I mean, that's why not too many of our parishes are like mega church type parishes. I mean, some, you know, especially the Greeks, I know they tend to do larger parishes and they do a good job at it, but they also have, you know, staff. I mean, right now I'm the only, you know, full-time staff member. I have some good friends that are Anglican and they have a church about our size and they've got like 12 people on staff. You know, and they have a priest who's just the spiritual director, you know, and so that's just that's hard for one priest to do because it is, we put a lot of emphasis on that, yeah, that spiritual care and those, you know, one-on-one conversations, and yeah, salvation is healing, and you know,
Yeah, I mean, you discover it in the Desert Fathers and kind of this ancient path, this ancient way, and they talk a lot about the soul. And I think not only can we talk about beauty and talk about truth and dogma, but this path of being able to be accompanied and to even submit yourself to a father. There's this something to be gained by just simply obeying and submitting in a healthy way. Of course,
in a
there's
healthy way,
divorces.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, for certain. I, you know, there's the Desert Fathers, what's that saying? You know, the one who chooses himself as a spiritual guide chooses a fool and a blind man or something, and you know, and I think, you know, particularly people coming from, you know, individualism and Protestantism especially, is we can still be crypto Protestant even in our orthodoxy. And so, you know, I think it is important to submit in a healthy way. You know, I always use the image of just falling back into the arms of the church and being shaped and formed by her. You know, we speak of the church kind of in this feminine language, you know, the womb of the church, she is our mother, you know, and even kind of how we talk about the Theotokos and the church, or kind of these images that come together that, you know, we need to be nurtured and be born again. You know, it's not the Protestant evangelicals who only talk about being born again, but you know, we speak of it as maybe not being born again, but being born in the first place. uh,
Hmm.
you know, being yeah, nurtured, and the church gives birth to us. You know, baptism as this image of birth and new birth. Christ shows us what it means to be truly human.
So, in your catechism class, I'm sure that you're finding, of course, many people who were former Protestants or perhaps other backgrounds, maybe Catholic. Are you finding people that are just like they were agnostic or atheist or spiritual seekers,
Yeah,
and they're finding the Orthodox Church? What's that process been like?
yeah, that's the newer demographic. I mean, I've been here almost 20 years, and it's always been mostly, former Protestants, former Catholics. I would say we have a few more Catholics than we used to, but I would say probably half, maybe a third to a half, are people who maybe were raised in the church, but then fell away and lived, a life of atheism, agnosticism, or just, you know, non-church life.
Mhm.
And coming to Orthodoxy is them coming back to Christianity. And that's been really amazing to see because it's people who have, lived life a little bit and have just seen just kind of the dead end of, I don't know, kind of a nihilism and just, yeah, trying to partake of things that just only bring them confusion and death, and really wanting to plug back into faith. And that's been really pretty amazing to see. And even a few that have never had any religious upbringing at all. This is their first foray, into Christianity. Um, and right now, I think I have 3 Muslims that are interested in Orthodoxy. But it's interesting, all three, well, 2 out of those 3 are people that converted to Islam at some point, but were raised Christian, became Muslim, and then just talk about this incredible darkness that they experienced while,
Mm.
while being Muslim, which is kind of interesting. And then I do have one that I think is I don't know if they use the term cradle Muslim. um, yeah, so that's been interesting.
That is interesting, and it's an important, I mean, discussion and opportunity because Islam was first of all so big, but then I think people even in the West who are considering Islam as an option, and this is something that I never actually considered, but I've noticed people that are a little bit younger than me have considered it. And it was like, well, why are they considering this? And it kind of went off. I was teaching my high school theology class one day, and I had a student who was pretty, I mean, she was pretty liberal. Like she was not thinking along typical Christian lines, but she asked this question. She's like, why don't we fast like the Muslims? Why don't we have order and like an ordered life where we know what we're supposed to do and everybody's doing it. We know when we're supposed to fast and feast and that question to me, that when the way that she posed it, it hit home for me, realizing this is a much bigger phenomenon where kids in their teens are asking really deep questions because they are longing for that. And
Yeah, I mean, the one young man, that's the exact story. Once he came to church and came to Vespers and, I don't know, started coming for a few weeks, he's like, "Oh my gosh, this is what I was looking for when I found Islam, but I didn't know that Christianity had anything like this."
yeah,
Yeah, so it's
it
amazing.
it was funny. I was at that time a Catholic catechist, and so I was like, well, there still is a tradition that keeps generally fasting, the traditional Christian fasting approach, and I'm like, "It's the Eastern Church, Orthodox," and, uh, and so she was fascinated by that, but I said, "It's not that the church didn't have this at one time, it's just
Mhm.
we in the West, we've lost that liturgical rhythm, that ordered way of life that you'd find in the monastery, in the church," and so she was definitely interested in that, but I think, if you really think about the people that are in their 20s and 30s, and really my own generation, but I didn't really grow up this way, but a lot of people were not eating even, meals together as a family.
Hmm.
They're just they have not much of an ordered life growing up. Maybe only one parent at home, or they're both working 2 jobs, and so there's just not much of an ordered life, and so I think there's just something in the soul that cries for that, cries out for an ordered life,
Yeah.
and so I think that maybe they're finding something of that in Orthodoxy, but of course, it's more than just structure and order. There has to be the Holy Spirit.
Right, right, right.
Do you ever find that uh, those spiritual seekers who may have been agnostics, or maybe even interested in Eastern religions. Do you think that sometimes they're able to get something about Orthodoxy before the former evangelical?
Oh, yeah, definitely. Well, because they don't have the same kind of knee-jerk reactions, like, tell me about, prayers to Mary and the saints and, all of that, like that kind of Romophobia. Um, yeah, I I found that with them, like, I don't know, that they can embrace, the Orthodox spiritual life a lot more quickly. They're very eager to start, a prayer rule and, coming to church and participating physically, in the fasting and because for them it's like they've already, especially the ones that have already looked into some kind of Eastern religions and things like that. They're already kind of longing for practices, spiritual practices, but then to see the connection between these spiritual practices and, Christ himself, that's the one key that, it kind of gets them, I think, in the door. Like, yeah, this is connected to true change and transformation in Christ.
It's not by accident that the first Christians called Christianity the way. Uh, there's a way of being, there's a way of life to
Yeah,
what it
yeah,
means to be a Christian. It's not an institution
practice
first.
what they're practicing, right?
Yeah, yeah, that I mean, for me, that was what really drew me as I was looking deeper into the Orthodox Church, for several years, there didn't seem to be this severing between orthodoxy and orthopraxy. There seemed to be that this was fused together, and if anything was, I don't wanna say orthopraxy is more important, but that's how orthodoxy really is expressed. It's incarnated, embodied.
Yeah, I mean, I remember as an evangelical, at least in my experience, it was like, okay, yeah, we want to live this life of holiness and grow in our life in Christ, but like, how do you do that? Like, what are the practical things um, that I can do that will help me do that? I mean, I guess you read your Bible, you pray, you go to church. Okay, well, but what are the tools like fasting, that will help me learn how to say no to temptation and, these, daily prayers and the sacramental life of the church. Like I was longing for the sacramental liturgical life of the church, but I didn't have it. But I was longing for it. I think this is why when I found Orthodoxy, I felt like, this is what my heart has been longing for. And the more, and I hear this a lot from people, it's like the more that you learn about the Orthodox faith, the more it's like, man, this is what I've always believed, but I never had the words for it. Like there's this deep resonance with it all. Um, yeah.
Father, Jonathan Ivanhoff from Transfigured Life, he recently shared a video, and it kinda connects to people just kind of, like, discovering orthodoxy out of the middle of nowhere. I think it was a a teenager, maybe young adult in Scandinavia, and the Wise Phone 2, which I currently use as my phone. It's an amazing phone that helps you not doom scroll or be addicted to social media and other vices because it doesn't have a web browser, but it does function like a phone. You can call, you can text, you can take pictures, you can do videos. It even has apps like Uber and Lyft. You can order food, maps to get around town, all the things that you kind of need in this modern life. While at the same time, being able to have a boundary between you and work or you and distractions. So you can be more present with your family, with your kids, with your spouse, whomever. This has been a very freeing experience for me to have the Wise Phone 2. Again, you can get $40 off through my discount code KING today. His family was atheist. I don't know if it was generations of atheists, but they were not practicing any kind of religion his whole life. But he just started asking like those big existential questions like, why am I here? What's this life all about? Where am I going? Is there morality? He starts asking those big questions, and he eventually said, like, "There's got to be a creator. Like, there's got to be something that brought me here." And
Hmm.
then he was wanting to answer like bigger questions of, okay, which God and which church, and eventually he settled on Christianity, and then it led him to Orthodoxy, and so he just went from being an atheist straight to Orthodoxy without really encountering it in his area. It was one of these things where he's just kind of searching it out,
That's
and
amazing.
he's just plucked out of atheism in Scandinavia, and now he's a faithful sort of practicing Orthodox Christian. And so that just kinda made my jaw drop like, wow, this is more than just evangelicals discovering the faith. This is happening to people that are in sort of these, deserts, long generations of atheism or, skepticism in parts of Europe and in other places. It's just like, I'm kind of blown away by that.
I mean, I've even heard a few people have told me about dreams they've had, I mean, I don't know what to do with that. But, this one inquirer talked about he had this dream about, the Buddha was sitting under this tree and, all of a sudden blood started dripping on Buddha's head and he looked up and there was Christ like on the cross and, like this was just something that, he woke up and it was like, oh my gosh, I need to, what does this mean? And it caused him to just take some steps to kind of re-embrace his Christianity and kind of led him away from studying Buddhism back to Christianity. And it took like another year or two before he showed up here, but what do you, and I've heard that with a few Muslims as well, having dreams and
Yeah.
that they have ghosts, or I don't know. It's just
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely, of course, in our tradition and it's in
right,
the scriptures, but it can be difficult to discern, of course, because it's like
right,
this wild, this
right.
wild world.
Desert fathers are like, if an angel Gabriel appears to you, treat it as if it's from the devil, and God will make sure it gets through if it's really
Yeah.
him. So
He will show
I don't
the
want to
he
put
will
too much
show the signs.
right emphasis on it, but you hear these stories, you're like, okay, well,
I kinda wanna turn the conversation to, okay, well, there's all these new inquirers coming in, but how do we keep our own kids Orthodox to be faithful to Christ and faithful to this faith that we've found?
yeah, I do not feel like an authority on that subject. I do have four sons, and some are currently not attending church. But I think maybe that does make me an expert in some ways too. But my wife and I talk about it, quite a bit. I think the important thing is that kids are raised within the community of the faithful, so they are a part of a community. So really having relationships with others in the life of the church. And then, when they go off to college, I mean, that's really the time. It's like, okay, here's the like we told our kids when they turned 18, before they were 18, it was, we go to church on Sundays. This is just what we do, in our family. And then, once they turn 18, it's like, okay, well, we're not going to wake you up anymore. You have to be the one, now making that decision for yourself. So I think there is a time where, kids, when they grow up, they have to make it their own. What I love about Orthodoxy is that we give them the faith. We baptize them. We give them Holy Communion. Um, and then they have to normalize that and make that their own at some point. So I think it is important for, young adults to have to go through that of, sometimes maybe I have to say no in order to be able to say yes, at a later point and to not be kind of so scandalized by that, maybe that is something that it's important for them to go through, just like, on Thomas Sunday, we sing about the most wonderful doubt of Thomas. We hymn it. Doubt bore certain faith. And so, I mean, in a way, it kind of ties back to the deconstruction conversation. I think, deconstruction sometimes can be a healthy thing in order for it to bring someone back to faith. And I think as Orthodox, we're not scandalized by these types of questions. I think we have to raise our children to be, healthy and be able to have good, healthy discussion. So, like our dinner table conversations all the time, we're always talking about, questions of faith, questions of culture, um, and so, my kids grew up knowing that like it's okay to have those conversations and we can talk about it, and that our whole life is lived kind of in and through the life of the church. That this is the center of our life, as Orthodox Christian families. So, I mean, I guess in my context, we're living it and trying to experience the reality of that. I know in our parish we have, a youth group, we have a young adult group. We really try to engage. We have a very active church school as well. Really trying to engage each age group, kind of where they're at, and that's been great. That's been great.
Yeah, that's wonderful. I think, there is a time where people do need to have some breathing room to explore those questions. And I mean, I went through it. I mean, I almost became an atheist. And I
Yeah,
think that's probably why I in part kind of respect people's process.
yeah,
Um, Though it can be, I'm sure, heart-wrenching when it's your own kids, but, I think that's why it's also important to read the lives of the saints, because unless they're really short summaries, the longer tale typically involves a lot of ups and downs, and you even think of Saint Augustine, who is his mother, Saint Monica, is praying for his return, over the years, and so, um, she's a good person to turn to ask
yeah,
for her
for sure.
intercessions, I think, when people are in that situation.
Yeah, and I think when, youth are starting to, I don't know, kind of question and deconstruct, to challenge them of, what is this deconstruction, leading you to? Is there a sense of, if you're wanting to kind of rebel and ask these questions, well, what about like the rebellion of like reclaiming faithfulness as an act of rebellion?
Mm, yeah.
There's this great book by there was a guy that was in a band actually on Tooth and Nail, a band called Showbread, Josh Porter, and he wrote a book called Death to Deconstruction: Reclaiming Faithfulness as an Act of Rebellion. And I just thought that title was great. It's a really good book. I mean, he's writing from a more of a Protestant perspective, but I think he saw the deconstruction as well and was really kind of challenging. Like, it's easy to rebel, it's easy to deconstruct, but it's much harder to like remain faithful and ask the hard questions so that you can remain faithful. Yeah. And so, I think it's good to be able to engage those conversations. It's important.
I'm gonna try to connect the beginning of our interview to the end here because, uh, I think that maybe my experience with kind of like Tooth and Nail Records as a teenager and listening to kind of like music, there was sometimes you could find these themes where they were talking about sort of like this good rebellion against the pattern of this world, you
Mhm.
know, like what you find in Orthodoxy, like death to the world, right? I think I did even kind of pick up on that. I mean, you find it in St. Paul, right? He's like talking about being in rebellion against the pattern of this world.
Mhm.
But then you certainly can find that theme in the Orthodox tradition, this sort of good kind of rebellion.
Yeah, I mean, I keep thinking I want to write an article or a book about how, punk rock prepared me for orthodoxy. Um, but I think how I would encapsulate that all is, what drew me to, kind of the punk and rebellious subculture was, there was this activism of like, we're going to change things. We're going to, yeah, question everything. And, um, but what I found in orthodoxy is the activism of the heart. That as long as the activism is external, like I'm going to solve all those things out there and, we're going to change the world. And I'm still not looking at my heart. It's still everybody else's problem and not mine. So what I appreciate about orthodoxy is what I was actually longing for was an activism of the heart where the focus was, if I want to change the world out there, I need to change the world and here. I can't remember which saint it says, but through the human heart is both, all of the angels, but so are
Mhm.
also all of the demons in the darkness of, so to be
Saint Mar
truly.
Saint Marcurius of Egypt, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So to be truly, like punk rock is to you know, go on that journey into the heart and the activism of the heart. And that's what's truly going to change things. I think that's what I was maybe looking for when I was in that music scene, but really what I was looking for was the church. What I was looking for was Christ, who was descending even into the hell and the Hades of the doors that I lock from the inside. Christ himself is there saying, all right, let's get up. I'm standing on the smashed gates of Hades. Like, this is salvation, this is good news. Yeah, so I think there's a real connection there. When we think about that rebellion, it really should be focused on kind of the rebellion of fighting the evil that is still within our hearts.
Mm. Yeah, we can make our own hearts and lives into like a living hell, and even Christ can descend into that
Yeah,
and
yeah,
destroy those gates, which is definitely the best news, kind of the scariest news too, right? To
yeah,
to to have to
yeah.
face yourself. So how can people support what's going on at Holy Cross and with the ministry that you're a part of? Is there any way that we can pray for Holy Cross and
Oh
support what's
yeah,
going on with
yeah,
what you're up
certainly.
to?
We covet your prayers, just like every other parish right now is experiencing the same growth. Yeah, just pray for us here, as we grow, and um, you can support us too. I mean, you can go to our website, and certainly if you wanted to support financially our ministry and our growth, um, that would be wonderful. And if you're interested in any of the luxury music or anything, I mean, that's all on all the streaming platforms, and we have a Bandcamp page. You can purchase our vinyl. And then our movie, there's the documentary on our story of three of us becoming priests, and you can see that on the streaming platforms as well. I think on Amazon Prime and YouTube and various places. So Father David, the singer, he's actually just moving to DC. He is starting a new job as the secretary for the OCA. So he's kind of had been asked to do that. So he was in Tyler, Texas. Father James, the guitar player, his brother is in Beaufort, South Carolina, serving a parish down there. And then our other guitar player, Matt, he lives in Atlanta. And then our drummer lives in Asheville.
Oh yeah, so you are all down south in
Yeah,
the
so we're all down
Bible
south.
Belt.
Yep.
Oh, that's great.
Staying in the Bible Belt.
Yeah, yeah. There's been a lot of neat things hopping on online talking about Appalachian Orthodoxy.
Right, right.
I don't know, you're not that close to the Appalachian Mountains, are you?
We're about 2 hours,
Yeah,
east.
in the shadows.
And actually, our guitar player, Matt, who did the documentary, he also did an awesome documentary on the Sacred Harp hymnal, the music from the South, the a cappella, form of music in rural Southern or primitive Baptist type churches. And it's an awesome documentary. And there's a lot of like Orthodox that are looking at the Sacred Harp hymnal as maybe a way to think of an indigenous kind of North American a cappella form.
Yes, okay, well, I'll definitely check out that documentary, that's
Yeah,
pretty cool,
Awake
that's neat.
Awake My Soul is the name of that documentary.
Well, Father Christopher, it was a joy to have you on, Barrel Age Faith and to explore some of these questions and your own story. It's, great for the listeners, but I just get to personally enjoy it myself, so thank you
Yeah,
so much
no,
for coming on
this
the
is great.
show,
Yeah, thanks
and,
so much.
yeah, yeah, we'll keep you in our prayers, your parish, and we're excited for all the growth that's happening there, and then, maybe some of my old friends from my old music days will discover this interview, and maybe they'll follow the trail into the Orthodox Church as well, we'll
Yeah,
see.
that'd be great.
That'd be really fun, that'd be great. All right, we'll see you next time, Father, take care.
You, God bless.
The theme of the whole Bible is the divine indwelling of the world. That's why the Bible and Orthodox tradition are on exactly the same page. At the center of our faith is the transfiguration of human beings in the whole creation by the divine glory. The incarnation is thus nested in the center of Scripture. Scripture, the prophets talk about God coming in person. He's going to come. He's going to come more fully than he's ever come before. And then he steps into the world as this Galilean Jew, born in Bethlehem and raised in Nazareth. That's the most intimate relation that God can possibly appropriate to the world, and it happens in the person of Jesus. At the beginning of Ephesians, we read of the recapitulation of heaven and earth in the person of Jesus Christ. He unites all things in him. And then near the end of Ephesians, we read about male and female reconciled, harmonized, and put in right order through the work of Jesus Christ and through the imaging of the divine bridegroom in the life of the particular human bridegroom.
The whole New Testament can be called the gospel, since it contains nothing but the gospel teaching. The novice should first of all study the Lord's commandments in the gospels of Matthew and Luke. And the study of the commandments in these evangelists combined with the actual practice of the commandments, the other scriptures that constitute the New Testament should also be easily understandable. This first episode is going to be free to all of you, and the rest will be for paid subscribers. Seraphim, thank you for preparing this Bible study through Ephesians.
Ephesians is one of Paul's later letters. It's relatively late in his apostolic career, probably somewhere in the early 60s AD. So this is, we might say, Paul's mature thought. And I think Paul, as he is entering into this decade, is aware that he's approaching the end of his apostolic career. This is something that you see in certain of his epistles, that Paul is aware that he's not going to live forever. He's aware that the main portion of his mission is coming to a conclusion, and then he thinks about putting his apostolic witness to writing as a kind of a perpetual testament and witness to his ministry. Zechariah 2 are the same as the words that are used in Ephesians chapter 3. This is Zechariah's vision of the cosmic sanctuary of the Messianic age, where God comes down and he dwells with man and he builds the city of God into his own dwelling place. And you can maybe start to see, if you're familiar with Ephesians, how this is emerging in Paul's mind in his elaboration of his vision of the church. Zechariah 3 and 6 actually explicitly tell us that these visions are prophetic of the Messianic age. It says, "Behold, this is the one who is a sign of my servant, the branch." The branch is the Messiah, as you see in Jeremiah 23, where it's the branch of David who's a king who's going to reign forever with justice and righteousness. And actually the branch in Zechariah is signified by the high priest whose name is Joshua or Jesus. This is one of those texts where Jesus is kind of bursting out of the page and begging the reader to recognize him.